Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Class C podcast. I am your host, Mary Sturgill. You know, this is the podcast that's brought to you through a partnership between the Hill Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department here at Furman University. Today, we welcome two members of the Furman family back into the fold, so to speak. Help me welcome Caroline Owen and Robert Cushing to the show. Hi, guys.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
I think, guys, that the artistic endeavor, music, theater arts, whatever the case is, any artistic endeavor is by nature innovative and entrepreneurial. And which is one reason I wanted to have you guys on this particular podcast, because we talk to innovators and entrepreneurs all the time. Not just that you started this new business, right? But what you do for a living before you started this business is in that vein, so to speak. So, Caroline, I'll ask you this question first. What you performed all over the world. You graduated from Furman with a piano performance degree. Um, Talk to us a little bit about some of your most kind of impactful memories in your performing life.
Sure. Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I mean, Furman was really the first place that I kind of was able to get all these different experiences and exposed to what the music world was like. And I think that one of the perks of Furman, not to, start bragging on Furman, but being in a smaller music program, having a study away program to Italy and having master classes where you get to start performing as an undergrad, that was really kind of the first place where my mind was opened to this whole world of all these amazing experiences musically. So I guess the first really impactful experience was the Furman music study away to Italy, to Arezzo. And I think Robert did that same program as well. So we spent the whole semester in Italy and just
Yes.
really saw firsthand some of the really important kind of bases of classical music. And, that was incredible. And then went on to do grad work at University of Georgia and Florida State. Um, got to study away in Salzburg, Austria. That was another really impactful experience. I had competed in an Atlanta-based competition. Actually, there's a Mozart Society, and they provide scholarships to go study at the Mozarteum, which is an academy in Salzburg. And that was so formative for me to just be in a place far, far away and really take in culture and kind of pretend to live in Europe for a little bit. So those were both super impactful. And then let's see, by the time I moved back to Atlanta, that's really when I had to get entrepreneurial, because I had decided that I didn't want to right away at least jump into more academia, because I had gone straight through all my degrees. So I had to figure out how to build a studio, a private teaching studio. And that's really where I learned a lot of skills in terms of marketing yourself um, and so that's one aspect of it. And then also as a performer over the last year being out of school, you really have to learn how to market yourself as an artist. And
Right.
so it's like you market yourself as a teacher and you market yourself as an artist. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It's such an entrepreneurial lifestyle.
Yeah, and a lot of times that marketing stuff isn't necessarily taught in your degrees, and we're going to circle back around to that, and talk about that as in your new endeavor as well. But Robert, I want to, in addition to performance, you write music as well, and you came back in 2019, I believe it was, and performed and had something that you wrote, performed here on campus. What was that like, seeing something that you created kind of come to fruition and kind of almost full circle, I would think.
Yeah, it was an out of body experience in the
Yeah.
best possible way. Because that particular work, which is a musical I wrote called In the Silence, I started kind of drafting in high school, but then I got serious about it in college, mostly because I was suddenly surrounded by a lot of people that were, equally passionate about the world of music as I
Hmm.
was. just having that collaboration, um, and that collaborative energy in the air, like turn it into something that could be put up on a stage. And then kind was performed my freshman year at Furman, and then we finally reached like the full thing fall of my senior year in 2019. Um, Caroline actually came to the first performance my freshman year.
Hmm.
Um, but there's an entrepreneurial element to that as well because you have to, I mean, it takes so many people to put on a musical. And so I was having to learn how to, get a fellow student that was interested in directing. And then I had to have actors, an orchestra. There had to be a tech crew, people running the soundboard. Like, there's so many moving parts that go on behind the scenes in a musical. And I had to work really hard to figure out how to build relationships with all of those people in a way that made them want to do the show too, and made sure that like my vision as the composer was still reflected on stage. So it
Yeah.
was a really fun challenge.
How did you come up with the idea together or separately? I'm not even sure exactly how it happened. So talk to our listeners about how did you come up with the idea for the Decatur Fine Arts Academy?
Yeah, so it felt like it all happened pretty organically, honestly. Like I mentioned, I had moved back to Atlanta a year ago and I was
Mhm.
starting up my own private studio. And the church that was my home church in Decatur, Georgia, offered for me to start teaching a lot of my lessons out of their space
Mhm.
for a very reasonable rate. And so I was grateful. So I started cultivating my studio out of that space and I was doing my thing. And then a couple months into that, the pastors of the church approached me with the idea um, and mentioned that they had had a program, a music program that was thriving back in the 90s. And they had all sorts of teachers and instruments. And I think it sort of became this perfect storm of like, hey, we have this person who's back teaching in our building. And what if we tried to revive something like that? And so they asked if I would be interested. And my heart was definitely interested in it, but my head was overwhelmed because I've never started something like that before. I could do like a one woman show, but yeah, so I was thinking about it for a while. And being part of an organization like that was always something that I had dreamed of, particularly where it comes to access to music education, and making it possible for people of all different backgrounds to have access to music lessons. So, it made sense, but logistically, I was, a little shy about it. So that's where Robert comes in, and I can let him take it from here.
Yeah, sure. So, um, I last year was taking piano lessons from Caroline since that was my first time being out of the music school environment. And I'd known Caroline from growing up together in
Mhm.
Decatur and then being at Furman together. And I thought, she'd be a really good person to keep me kind of accountable with my music so that I still have an outlet for practicing and having artistic guidance. And she mentioned this idea to me, I think just kind of in passing, of starting the academy. And my previous job before starting the academy was working in development and fundraising for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. And so
Mhm.
I was gaining kind of arts admin experience and really learning the nuts and bolts of what it takes to keep like a music organization financially afloat. Um, and I had been really curious about maybe was there an outlet where I could take some of what I was learning and channel it into an organization where I could be more on the leadership side of things. And so I saw this idea that the pastors had approached Caroline with kind of as an opportunity where, Caroline and I couldn't or wouldn't necessarily want to do it completely by ourselves. Caroline and I think neither of us would have wanted to tackle the project completely by ourselves, but together we kind of had the perfect resume to co-direct this organization and build it up from the ground. And then I also brought to the equation my experience from working in development and raising money for a nonprofit. And I think that is a big part of our long-term vision with the Fine Arts Academy is building a donor base that will help us fund scholarships and financial aid for students so that anyone that wants arts education in the Decatur community can get it without money being an obstacle to that.
Yeah, that was I was wondering about that because I mean, as we all know, we're in some difficult times right now, and many people, don't have the extra money for things like lessons, right? And so I was wondering how you guys were going to kind of weather that kind of storm until things kind of roll around and get better. Because as we know, when times are tough, the first things to go are the art programs in schools
Mhm.
and the personal lessons and things like that. So I think it's also important to note too that um, we talk a lot on this program about how when you start a new venture, it's important to surround yourself with the right people who complement your strengths and weaknesses. And I think you guys have naturally done that.
Yes.
Definitely.
It sort of felt fit together. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So in difficult times, nonprofit, it's hard for nonprofits, right? And one of the things that goes out the window first is, of course, funding for the arts,
Hmm.
right? But states do have great artistic grant programs and things like that that are at state level and federal level. So, what is your kind of? I'm curious about how you're getting your funding now, and what kind of because you're not alone in this. Just because you're a nonprofit, all startups have this problem, finding the funding. So, Robert, what are you looking at, and how are you kind of pulling all that together?
We are starting with building up a strong individual donor base.
Hmm.
Um, since we are, between the two of us growing up in Decatur, we both have a lot of connections already. And then with the church being so centrally located in the Decatur community, it's kind of we're 1 degree removed from a lot of people in the city. And so right now we've been soliciting kind of low-level individual donations that at this stage of the game, anything helps. And we're very appreciative for anything and everything. And we've primarily done that we've now had 2 recitals featuring our instructors
Hmm.
where we have invited kind of different groups of people and had a call for donations as part of the programming. Um, and they've been very successful so far, and I think a great way to also establish our reputation and the caliber of our teachers with the audiences that are hearing them. So they're really serving a lot of purposes right now. And as we gain that kind of foundation from these individual donors, and we fill out the many piles of paperwork to get our 501c3 status as a nonprofit, then that will open up a lot of doors for applying for grants and um, soliciting foundations for larger donations that will, I think, really allow us to take our um, our financial aid and scholarship programs to the next level.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Caroline, you want to add anything to that?
I was just gonna say, kind of to piggyback on the performing idea. Actually, Robert and I were just brainstorming the other day about extending the idea of these sort of benefit recitals to eventually have some sort of series, like a concert series where we can bring in other musicians in the Atlanta area as well. And I think that could be a really exciting way to just bring more people in and raise more money that way. But yes, that's kind of what I wanted to add there.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. I also love the idea that you guys have to, because when we think about, music schools and things like that, we think just school age kids, but you are open to all ages.
Yes.
Um, my youngest student is 4 years old, and my oldest student is 80. So
Oh, I love that.
we run the spectrum.
Yeah.
That is awesome. What about you, Caroline? What's your oldest?
My oldest is around 50, and actually one of my former high school teachers is now one of my students, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty
So,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. And it's fun. It really
Yeah.
is. We want we don't want to be limiting in that regard. So it keeps things interesting. You have to really format your lessons very differently for all kinds of ages and
Yeah,
levels.
for sure. And purposes, right?
Purposes, right? Because not everyone is there to become a concert pianist.
Right.
And some people just want to play Beatles, and that's fine too.
Yeah,
So,
I'm like that. I just want to learn how to play the guitar so I can sit on my back porch and play and sing.
right.
with friends. That's all, that's all I want. And I'm sure I'm not alone. The So let's jump back into that marketing topic you talked about, because I think that's the other area that entrepreneurs kind of struggle with, because as individuals, we all have our own personal talents, but there are certain things that we need to learn quickly when we're an entrepreneur. So, I love the idea of that series would be a great marketing tool, right?
Mhm.
So, what have you learned, Caroline, about that kind of stuff since you started?
Well, um, do you mean since we started the academy? Marketing?
Well, personally, and since you started the academy as well, because like you said, you've got to, as a musician and an artist, you've got to promote yourself as well, right?
You do. And I can speak to the academy specifically first on this. Something that Robert and I really wanted for the academy was to have not only high level teachers, but also high level performers.
Mhm.
And I think that that is something that sets us apart from a lot of other music schools, just in terms of promoting teacher performers, not just teachers, right? And so I think with the performances that we've done so far, a great marketing strategy has honestly just been us giving our teachers a platform to perform and show their talents. And I think that's really been kind of a game changer for people, of being like, wow, these are actual artists with multiple degrees in music. And so I think we really want to keep utilizing our strength in that regard, of just the fact that we have good performers. And I think when families come in and see that someone is capable, their teacher is capable of performing like that, I think that's a really good motivator to enroll their kids in lessons with somebody like that. Um, but I think in terms of, in general, yeah, you have to market yourself on social media as a performer, for better or for worse.
Mhm.
Um, and you have to stay engaged with, you kind of have like an online base and an in-person networking as well. You have to go to a lot of things in terms of like conferences and festivals, and that's really where you make your connections. I mean, I think the musician's path is very linear, where quite literally, you go from point A to point B, and then when you get to point B, you meet somebody who will then open an opportunity for you to get to point C. And so it's that kind of in-person networking is so, so important. That's how I've made a lot of my own contacts. And yeah, so something that would apply to the academy in that regard is, we want to start going into more of the Decatur area schools in person, and offering different workshops and master classes, and just kind of getting to know the orchestra and band programs and the kids that are enrolled there, on a more personal level. And I think having that in-person relationship is really going to help in terms of our enrollment. So those are just,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's those are some great ideas, and especially the one thing you said about those in-person relationships that you're building are tremendous, and that's true I think for any entrepreneur, right? And you never know what person you're going to meet who's going to be able to connect you to the next person who's opening doors for you, right? Or can help you with this particular problem that you may have.
Mhm.
So I think that's fantastic that you guys are doing that, and I'm hoping our listeners are picking up on it. I'm sure they are, because they're very astute on those things that they can then take from this conversation and apply, into their own lives, into their own entrepreneurial journeys. And Robert, I want to talk to you a little bit about, because I tell my students this all the time, is if you're passionate about something, if you want to do something, a podcast, whatever it is, right? Because I teach digital storytelling. Don't wait till after you graduate, right? And when you were talking about writing that musical when you started it in high school, right? This is a prime example that I would just want to highlight for people. There's no time like the present, no matter what age you are.
Agreed. Um, because especially when you're in an environment where you've got a great network, like what Caroline was saying, and then an environment like college helps because that network, they're also your friends.
Right.
um, and so using the resources that you have sitting in front of you when you have them sitting in front of you, will make your life so much easier. And I mean, I still am in contact with lots of the people I worked with on that musical, um, from college, even now that we've kind of spread all over. But and I think that that's kind of something I'm trying to do with the academy as well, is and speaks to what Caroline was saying about hiring, excellent teachers who are also excellent performers,
Hmm.
is really emphasizing amongst our group of teachers now, which we get nine teachers, Caroline. Yeah,
Yes,
nine.
including us.
Yes,
Yeah,
nine
9
instructors,
including you two. Yeah.
including us, is the fact that we're building a little kind of cohort of
Hmm.
Atlanta area musicians that I have no doubt will lead to opportunities in the future for some of us that, we can't even dream about right now. Um, but I think that is something that we're hoping to be kind of unique with the Decatur Fine Arts Academy, is that yes, there is, just kind of the job aspect of it. Yes, come in, teach your lesson, carry on with your day, but really fostering our relationships with the teachers at the academy so that it's somewhere that they want to continue working and really establish kind of long-term relationships with the fellow instructors and their students, because continuity in music education is so important.
Hmm.
Um, and that is something that can be kind of hard to maintain with individual music instruction, especially with young students. So we're hoping to avoid that.
Yeah, and even your comment about coming back to Caroline and seeking her out to teach you, to keep you up on, on your toes on things, that's a prime example of that continuity that you need.
Yeah. Well, and piggybacking off of that, I mean, we really do want to take care of our teachers in addition to taking care of our students. And that means, you know, I don't know how familiar you are with other kind of music school models, but oftentimes a large chunk of pay has to be taken out of what the teachers earn.
Right.
And we didn't want to do that because we wanted people who were really high quality, and we wanted, I think a lot of times music teachers aren't necessarily paid what they should be getting paid for, and we wanted to honor that in addition to, providing these services for families as well. So
Right.
we really do want to respect our teachers as musicians and, you know, pay them what they deserve to be
Yeah.
paid.
And still make a living yourself, of course.
Exactly.
Right.
Because it's both
That balancing act.
that's a plus, I think, of both of us, not only as co-directors, but we are musicians, so we understand it. And so
Mhm.
therefore we want to treat our other instructors the way that we would want to be treated. So
Yeah. You know what? I think that's a great lesson for all managers, to treat your employees the way that you would like to be treated, right? And to really lift them up and collaborate with them. I think that's a sign of a great leader. We've talked many times on this broadcast about what it takes to be a great leader. And I think you just nailed one of those aspects right on the head with that comment, you know?
yeah, it's important.
Yeah, for sure. Because you want to keep them, right? It costs companies more money to retrain people, and than and rehire people, right? Hire new people than it does to keep the good people that you have.
Right.
And you guys are right on top of that wave, and I love it. What advice do you have for? I'm going to take this in two ways, but first, what advice do you have for people who might want to take a music lesson of some sort, but who are kind of, well, I don't have a music bone in my body. We kind of hear that a lot, or I can't carry a tune and that kind of thing, but yet they're interested in it.
I think there is absolutely no harm in just giving it a shot. And a a good teacher, I think a trait of a good teacher is that you will walk away from that first lesson feeling glad that you took that first lesson. Um, I think that a good teacher will really make a student, regardless of if they've, never touched an instrument before, or if they, have decades of experience and want to get back into it, will really make the student feel encouraged exactly where they are, and will really be understanding of the fact that everyone has to start somewhere, and there's, you know, I would say there's no shame in that, but I don't even want to put the word shame into the topic.
Right.
That there's a lot of excitement, I think, in trying something new, even if it doesn't end up being your thing and you don't like continue for very long. Just kind of taking that risk, um, you know, I think you've got nothing to lose and a whole lot to gain by giving it a shot.
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. I think so many of us are, my sister used to tell me that I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, which is why that phrase popped to mind, right? So many of us are told by people in our lives, whether they're joking or whether they're, just not being very supportive, by that, which prevents us from doing things. And I think so many more people could tap into their creativity if they didn't listen to those negative voices, you know?
Yes. And some people still have um not great memories of growing up with a music teacher and
Right.
being turned away from it instead of being able to continue with it, even in some capacity. And I think that is definitely something that we are trying to prevent by making all of our lessons positive experiences, no matter what the goals of the student are.
Mhm.
Um, if you come in with some amount of excitement and interest in the instrument, you are going to learn something. And I think a good teacher does that lovingly and also effectively. You can be both, positive and an effective teacher.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
One
But,
story that
yeah, go ahead, Robert.
uh, sorry, just to wrap up, one story I always think of in my own from my own experience with more beginning students is so much of learning the fundamentals of music is not necessarily about innate talent or
Mhm.
how efficient is your instructor or anything, but do you feel supported and encouraged by your teacher, and do they kind of connect with you on a personal level, kind of separate from the music? Because growing up, I started piano when I was 5, and I really think it took me about 6 or 7 years for it to actually click and for it to be something that I became really self-motivated with and enjoyed practicing. But I loved my teacher so much that when I would tell my parents I wanted to quit, they're they would say, "Okay, well, you have to call your teacher and tell her that you don't want to keep taking lessons," and that would immediately settle that for me. Um, and then I guess she thought one day it'll click for him, and she was exactly right, and now here I am. But I think that's just a perfect example of how a great teacher can keep a student motivated, even if it's not the literal music that is motivating them at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great comment. Um, all right, so now let's kind of switch that to other entrepreneurs, because so many times, similar vein, right? That we have this idea that we want to start something, and someone says, "Oh, well, that's going to be too hard," or "Are you sure that's going to be, you still got to make money." Those kinds of comments that might prevent us from talking, and taking those next steps. So, what advice do you have for beginning entrepreneurs who, you know, might be where you are in a year or two?
I would say, and I think we've already touched on this, but to just, if you are picking up on different connections personally and opportunities that are right there, to just go for it and see what happens and take advantage of those personal connections with people who can help you um in terms of offering skill sets that you may not necessarily have. I mean, I know that one of Robert's family members, for example, has is an attorney, and so we've gotten a lot of guidance from him on how to go about the legal matters of starting a business that I didn't know anything about. And so there are people out your back doorstep, I think, who are resources, and just talk to them and see what they can kind of um help you with, and not be afraid to ask about it. And then I think identifying your own strengths and weaknesses and seeing how you can find a friend or a partner who can complement and sort of supplement that. I mean, that's what Robert and I have done for sure. We brought our
Yeah.
own different musical experiences together, and I think to be okay with kind of taking it one step at a time and having the patience, knowing that it might not look glamorous at first or be a really fast success, but if you have the patience to let it go, it's baby steps, then it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to reiterate a couple things that you said for our listeners because I think they're so important. And the first one is to don't say no to the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I think in conversation, even in passing, we're like, well, they didn't really mean it when they offered that. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that you'd be surprised, or we'd be surprised, how many times people, if they do offer something, that they really do mean it.
Yes.
Take that one step every day
Mhm.
toward the ultimate goal. Right.
Yeah. And I know, like, when I was first thinking about starting this, I had all these what if questions in my head of like, well,
Hmm.
what if I don't end up wanting to stay in Atlanta long term? What if I, you know, decide that this isn't for me? What if I want to go this route and I want to get back into academia soon? And I think those are things that can really prevent you from at least just trying something.
Hmm.
And I can say so far it's been really rewarding, and I think to just go with what's right there, and you would at least know, you would have at least tried it, and you might end up really falling in love with it more than you thought you would. Or if you realize that it's not your thing, then that's okay and you pivot, but you at least, you tried to you tried it out.
Yeah, exactly. And you can always pivot, like you just said, you can always um take a turn, and once you learn this, maybe it's going to lead you in the direction that you're supposed to go in, and you would never know that direction unless you'd done that first thing.
Right. So I would say don't let the what ifs scare you.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think that having a good sense of humor about when the what ifs don't necessarily pan out, or you know, you work so hard towards one goal and then it takes like a left turn, and you just kind of have to, especially when it's something brand new and totally amorphous at the beginning, just being like, well, okay, we'll move on to the next thing, try again, and being flexible with yourself and recognizing that as long as you're putting the requisite hard work and dedication into it, you can kind of trust your preparation, and that it things will go awry, but they'll be okay, because especially if you have good people in your corner. um, because I think that this is not something that I could have or even would have thought to seriously attempt without Caroline and kind of the small army of people that we have supporting us, from the audience and the wings. It's kind of like what I was saying about putting on the musical. Like
Hmm.
it's a small village that it takes to um, make something like this happen, even if the outside world only sees like a polished finished product. Like understanding that there's a whole lot of moving parts, um,
Yeah.
and that's okay and is good, because that also takes some of the burden of it has to be an absolute success and it's all up to you. Like I don't feel that way, because I feel like I have a lot of support and a lot of understanding from the people that I'm working with for when I do inevitably slip up or make mistakes. I know that like Caroline and all the other people that are working with us are here to kind of pick up where I may leave off one day, and I can pick up the next day. And yeah, it's just great. The relationships are really fundamental to making this work.
Yeah, and so is that attitude about being able to, just pick it up again the next day when you stumble or whatever, and take a look at that, whatever made you stumble, and say, okay, how can I do this differently next time, right?
Hmm.
Which I think a lot of entrepreneurs innately do, maybe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's many of us who also let that be a roadblock to us. We're like, well, I stumbled this one time. I don't want to try this again. Right. And that's
Hmm.
what I always encourage our listeners to kind of overcome, is that stumble was preparing you for something greater. Right.
Mm,
Um,
absolutely.
Guys, I know we touched on this just a little bit, but but maybe I want to give you the opportunity to take a little bit further. What is your ultimate dream for the Decatur Fine Arts Academy?
Um, my ultimate dream, I have a couple. One is for us eventually to not only have music lessons going on, but to also expand to other art forms, and then have those art forms collaborating with one another. I think that would just be the coolest thing. And to all have it housed in the same place and kind of see those different areas going on simultaneously would just be artistically a dream for me. And then really the access idea is the other big dream that I have, of just not making sure that finances for paying for music lessons is never a barrier for entry for a family, because that's how music, no matter how much you are going to pursue it long term, it makes a positive impact on everybody's life. It just does. I mean, we need music and we need the arts. And so to have more young people have access to that on a one-on-one basis, I really do think that's the kind of stuff that changes the world. I mean, not to sound cliche, but I think it really does on a small scale. And so to really have a robust scholarship program um would be the other big dream of mine.
Yeah, that first big dream gave me goosebumps. The one about the collaboration between the different art forms. I love that. I love everything you just said. I love, but that one especially gave me goosebumps. Robert, what about you?
I would love to see the Fine Arts Academy evolve into just kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I guess an understood part of the Decatur community, that it's, they're just make it another landmark. Everyone knows someone that's involved with the Fine Arts Academy, and it becomes kind of this self-sustaining community unto itself,
Hmm.
where, like Caroline said, we've got all sorts of artistic disciplines, and lots of students coming in and out of the doors, and it's, there's demand for the arts. There's people that are there to instruct in the arts, and everything kind of serves the other components. And um, I'd love to see our enrollment really, really grow. We've got 45 students enrolled now, and that's with basically a month of being open. And so I think as we continue to expand our offerings and continue to um, open the doors even wider in terms of financial ability, then I see that number just continuing to grow. And likewise, the number of instructors growing, and then it can kind of become a machine that doesn't run itself necessarily, but is self-sustaining.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. How should people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
We are on Facebook and Instagram. You can just search the Decatur Fine Arts Academy. Our website link is on both of those pages. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with us. Or you can email directly at decaturfineartsacademy@gmail.com. That's another easy way.
All right. Guys, thank you again so much for being on here. I think you've given our listeners some great nuggets of information to think about and hopefully apply to their own lives as well.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so much
us.
for having
Yeah.
us.
All right, guys, that does it for this episode of the Classy Podcast. Remember, this podcast is brought to you through a partnership between the Hill Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department here at Furman University. And you can listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Just make sure that you hit those subscribe buttons to both of those so that you are alerted to when we have new episodes out. Until next time, everybody, dream big.